The indentured labourers of Trinidad and Tobago, majority of South Asian descent, brought from their motherland to perform physically straining labour in colonies and plantations in the 19th and 20th centuries, after the abolition of the transatlantic slave trade in 1833. These individuals were labelled historically as coolies, a term coined from the word derived from the Chinese word coolie, meaning bitter labour, but also used in a derogatory form to describe these indentured workers as lower class and uneducated. During this period of indenture, these now very much problematic historical artifacts emerged. So-called Cooile postcards became popular, being sent across the then European empires, including the British and the Dutch, used as souvenirs. Focusing on specific depictions of women on these postcards, most of these illustrated and pictured scenes involving these coolie belles, mostly Indian labourers and on plantations, as well as multiple forms of manual labour. What is important to identify is how indentured women are specifically portrayed in a very modelled and studio-like settings, and very purposely dressed as well as labelled in ways to befit the Orientalist view and the male gaze. But the reality of the lives of these women were drastically different than the picturesque pose clicked onto a camera and posted throughout the Western world. These postcards reinforce the idea of Oriental and exotic cultures overseas to a Western audience, very much a way to shape, influence, and embed ideas of imperialism and Western societal dominance over parts of the world deemed other. These images were staged some more than often than others, are clearly taken within a studio. This form of propaganda normalized the view of indentured people in the Caribbean and set stereotypes and racial caricatures with the dehumanizing captions. These postcards perpetuated a larger colonial and imperialistic narrative of racial stereotypes, portraying these indentured women as exotic, not the same, subservient, not equal, primitive, and not civilized. Today, with research and understanding of the true histories of what faced the indentured women of Trinidad, these postcards are one of the many problematic productions of the British Empire and can be used as a source of evidence reflecting the cultural and racial exploitations that were prevalent in the system. These historical artifacts must be dealt with sensitivity to fully understand the contemporary context in which they were created and unfold the reality that they obscured. This exhibition will first take a look at what these postcards were presenting at their core: indentured women. What was indenture? What was the need for these more or less slavery contracts in the British colonies? Though they provided a less than adequate income to compensate for their efforts, the living and working conditions were far from habitable or functional. A closer inspection of the postcards take a look into the subconscious ideas behind the representation of women. What is presented in these postcards? What do they mean through the labellings of a coolie belle or coolie in general? What perspective is embedded and indoctrinating the British audience to adhere to? Why are the women dressed so opulently and yet in such demure poses? Was this the reality or the make-believe the British Empire, as well as other European colonizers, wishing to reinforce the people to believe and think? Understanding the ideas of Edward Said Ghosh and the school of thought regarding Orientalism, imperialism, and the male gaze, which was heavily prevalent in the British Empire, evidenced by these postcards.